This week, the lost word of Freemasonry. What exactly is it? Are there other organizations that also share such a lost word? Is the lost word nothing more than an allegory for a search for something more and deeper, intrinsic within the human mind, soul, or body? From a short talk bulletin by an unknown author, we'll explore the idea, as well as an awesome tale about the giving nature of one Artaban, the fourth wise man. Then, we'll hear from illustrious brother Stephen L. Harrison, fresh off of sabbatical, with a brand new Masonic Minute you're not going to want to miss. The Mysterion. We wrap it up with a contemplative exercise about being a workhorse. Are we doing enough? And are we being a perfectionist? All this and more. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Here's your host, Brother Robert Johnson.
Welcome back. This is episode number 578. I'd like to thank the contributors, fellows, producers, and legacy partners of the WCY podcast. Without you, we do not make this show. It is impossible to make without your help. So I want to thank all of you. A shout out to those legacy partners. Start thinking about this year's episode that you get to produce. Pick the content and all of that. So if you're curious on how you can help support the WCY podcast, including writing your own episode that we'll cover and do all the research for, head on over to WCYpodcast.com. All right, the presentation schedule is up, and we've got something coming up tomorrow. If you're listening to this on Sunday night, on Martin Luther King Day, I'm going to be doing a contemplative dialogue on the level and justice at Recovery Lodge number 31 in South Carolina. It's going to be a fun night. Toward the end of the month, January 31st, I'm going to be at just doing a visitation with Alvin A. Crump, Allied Masonic Degrees. So if you are an AMD member, reach out to Alvin A. Crump and see if you can come on out to the meeting. I'm just going to be talking about Masonic Week and some of the benefits of going there. And then, super secret topic, but it is on the website. But I'm going to be doing a premiere presentation that will be revealed soon. And then on February 18th, I'll be flying out to the Valley of Michigan. We're going to be doing the Masonic Pub Crawl, Freemasonry in America and its Colonial Tavern Beginnings. It should be a very fun day of Masonic light out there, so looking forward to all of those events. I hope to see you guys all at Masonic Week coming up in February. I think I'm going to be out there the 8th or the 9th through Saturday. So I think Thursday, Friday, Saturday, head home Sunday. But it will be a good time. I hope that some of you who considered coming last year and couldn't make it can make it out this year. And how about this? Masonicon Chicago. Yep, it'll be the third weekend in September this year. It's going to be a little bit more of an exclusive event. I have made the decision to involve my lodge. So, Space Novum Lodge has long been thinking about promoting its own Masonic Convention for Education, being as that is our mission. So I am in the midst of making all the changes, but it will become Space Novum's Masonicon Chicago 2023, and it will be in September. I think the third weekend in September. It'll be a Saturday event, and more to come as we do more there. You look for website updates and things as we get closer. Many of you know that I have an affinity for the idea of the lost word. In fact, I do an entire presentation on it that's a good hour long. And because of that, there's a really cool article that was published on universalfreemasonry.org called The Lost Word under Masonic Articles and Essays, and it was published on January 11th, 2023, so just a few days ago, and the author is unknown. It does have a note here at the top that says, taken from a short talk bulletin series, an indispensable fountain of Masonic education. This article deals with the central symbolic concept of Freemasonry, the lost word of a Master Mason. Ancient craft masonry attains its climax in the symbolism of the lost word, and a quest for its recovery. But in our ritualistic work, there is little attempt at explanation. The observation has been made that language is a growth. Every word has to be created by man. In back of every word is some want or necessity of mind or body, and the genius to make expression in some sign or sound that we call a word. Quote, "Some words are rough and rugged like the skins of wild beasts, others glitter and glisten like satin and gold. Words have been born of hatred and revenge, of love and sacrifice, of hope and fear, of agony and joy. In them mingle the darkness and the dawn. They are the garments of thought, the robes of reason, the shadows of the past, the reflection of the present, and the crystallization of human history." End quote. It has been said that the egocentric instinct in man has made quote-unquote self-preservation the first law of nature, that growing out of, or alongside of, it is a gregarious instinct which has produced social governments and philanthropic enterprises. Deeper than these instincts, there is in man a consciousness, however dim, inexplicable forces and agencies, and an urge to realize their potency. In the childhood of the race, this occasioned the thought of supernatural power in the word that causes the heavens on high to tremble, the word that makes the world below to quake, constitute the first two lines of the Babylonian hymn inscribed upon the clay tablet 5,000 years ago, in which the wise priesthood of a great religion sang praises to the might and power of a word. Some Masonic authors and writers held that Aum, pronounced Om, is the oldest omnific name of God in the world, that it came out of India, and that it has also been spelled Aom, but pronounced the same way. Frank C. Higgins has written a book in his name as The Lost Word, and claims it is concealed in the terminal letters in the names of 3 ruffians. To the best of my knowledge, this concealment has not been satisfactorily explained. In my opinion, Freemasonry is largely indebted to the Hebrews for the legend of the lost word. Shakespeare said, quote, "What's in a name?" The Jews saw in a name a sign standing for the personality, the achievements, the reputation, the character, the power, and the glory of the one who wore it. End quote. Joseph meant increaser. Moses meant drawn out of water. Israel meant Prince of God. And at the burning bush, the ineffable name of God Almighty was communicated to Moses. So overwhelming was its glory that the people pronounced it in whispers. The third commandment of the Decalogue, delivered from Mount Sinai, declared, "Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain." The priestly rule contained in Leviticus read, quote, "He that pronounceth the name of the Lord distinctly shall be put to death." End quote. At last, only the high priest was permitted to utter the name, and that but once a year. On the Day of Atonement, and in the Holy of Holies, its utterance was accompanied by the beating of cymbals and the blowing of trumpets so as to completely extinguish the sound of the human voice. Such were the quote-unquote wrappings of secrecy and sanctity which the Jews threw about the name of God. End quote. As they used no vowels in writing, all that was ever seen were 4 consonants, J, H, V, H. The Tetragrammaton, or 4-lettered name of God, which we call Jehovah. From the letters, there was no clue to the pronunciation. No one could understand them any more than we could know that Mr. or MR period stands for Mr. M-I-S-T-E-R, and DR period stands for Doctor, unless someone told us so. According to tradition, the great catastrophe of the Babylonian captivity was that, through the death of the high priest, without a successor, the name was lost. At the end of the captivity, priests and scribes began a search for the lost name, which has continued without avail for 2½ millenniums. The 4 consonants they had, but it is doubtful if anyone has been able to supply the sound of the vowels. It is believed that this 4-lettered name of God is the lost word of Masonry today. Like everything else in our science, it is a symbol. It is the consummation of all Masonic symbolism because it stands for divine truth. Brotherly love and relief are but the means to an end. The final design of our institution is its third principal tenet, the imperial truth. In some aspects, truth seems relative because it is not complete, but only partial. Now we see through a glass darkly, but the ultimates of truth are immutable and eternal. The fatherhood of God and the immortality of the soul. Quote, "Down to this deep foundation, Masonry digs for a basis of its temple, and finds an everlasting rock." Dr. Joseph Fort Newton says, quote, "Freemasonry makes no argument but presents a picture, the oldest, if not the greatest drama in the world, the better to make men feel those truths which no mortal words can utter, It shows us the tragedy of life in its blackest hour, the forces of evil, cunning yet stupid, which come up against the soul, tempting it to treachery. A tragedy which, in its simplicity and power, makes the heart ache and stand still. Then out of the thick darkness there rises like a beautiful white star, that in a man which is most akin to God, his love of truth, his devotion to duty, his willingness to go down into the night of death, if only virtue may survive and throb like a pulse of fire in the evening sky. Here is the ultimate and final witness of our divinity and immortality, the sublime, death-defying moral heroism of the human soul. Translated into personal terms, it is the Apostle Peter, at his execution asking to be crucified head downward. It is the Spartan Leonidas at the pass of Thermopylae, with a handful of men holding back the hordes of Persia and spelling out the salvation of the Greek Republic. It is the Swiss Arnold von Winkelried receiving the points of the Austrian spears into his own breast and making his dead body a bridge of victory for his countrymen. It is the American Nathan Hale grieving that he had but one life to give, but one supreme sacrifice to make at the altar of our national liberty. It is our operative Grand Master, the Tyrian builder before the brute forces of death and destruction, surrendering his life, but preserving his integrity. Brother H.L. Haywood says, quote, "The search for a lost word is not a search for a mere vocabulary or vocable of a few letters which one might write down on a piece of paper. It is the search for a truth. It is a quest for the highest possible life in the spiritual unfoldment of humanity. It is the seeking after the name, the power, and the glory of God. The purpose is the same, whether this age-old legend of the quest be woven into a tragic tale like Eugene Sue's Wandering Jew, or thrown about a mystic drama like Maurice Maeterlinck's Blue Bird, or crystallized in an epic poem like James Russell Lowell's Vision of Sir Launfal. Whether it be a missing chord of music, the vacancy of a sanctuary, a design left unfinished by the death of the master builder, or the lost word in masonry to be recovered through patience, perseverance, and time. It always symbolizes a search for something good and beautiful and true. At times of meditation and introspection, there is something vaguely haunting in the legend of the lost word, like the fleeting fragrance of a forest flower experienced in the past, the murmured music of a rippling brook heard in childhood, the purple sheen of twilight on a distant hilltop, or some exquisite dream of infinite love in the long ago forgotten but trembling at the doorway of memory. This quest is the central thought of Henry Van Dyke's The Other Wise Man, an inspirational story of beauty and charm which tells of the days when Augustus Caesar was the master of many kings and Herod reigned in Jerusalem. Artaban, the Median, the fourth wise man, studied the constellations and certain prophecies of Zoroaster, Balaam, and Daniel. Inspired by the appearance of a star in the sky, he sold his possessions and bought 3 gems, a sapphire, a ruby, and a pearl, to bear as tribute to a newborn king. The other 3 wise men were to wait for him at the ancient temple of the 7 spheres. Because he tarried in a palm grove outside the walls of Babylon to minister to a Parthian Jew in the ravages of a fever, he did not reach the appointed place in time, and found a note which said, "We have waited past the midnight hour and can delay no longer. We go to find the king. Follow us across the desert." This meant that Artaban must sell his sapphire to buy camels and provisions for the journey. A ministry of mercy cost him the first jewel. The 3rd day, after the wise men had laid at the feet of a child in a manger their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, Artaban entered Bethlehem, weary but full of hope, bearing his ruby and his pearl. The streets were deserted, but from an open door of a low stone cottage he heard a woman's voice singing softly. He entered and found a young mother hushing her baby to sleep. She told him of the strangers from the east who had appeared and gone, that the man from Nazareth had taken the babe and its mother and fled away to Egypt. She placed before him the plain fare of humble peasants. The baby slumbered as great peace filled the quiet room, but suddenly there came the noise of wild confusion in the street, the shrieking and wailing of a woman's voice crying, "The soldiers of Herod, they are killing our children." The mother's face grew white with terror. She huddled with her child in a dark corner of the room, Artaban's form filled all the doorway, and looking straight at the captain, he said, "I am alone in this place, and am waiting to give this jewel to the prudent captain who will leave me in peace." He showed the ruby, glistening like a great drop of blood in the palm of his hand. The lines of greed tightened hard around the captain's lips. He took the ruby in his fingers and gave the order, "March on, there is no child here, this house is still." Artaban turned his face to the east and prayed, "God of truth, forgive my sin. I have said that which is not to save the life of a child." The voice of the woman said very gently, "Because thou hast saved my life, the life of my little one, may the Lord bless and keep thee, lift up the light of his countenance upon thee, and give thee peace." Thus he parted with his second jewel. Down in Egypt, Artaban found faint traces here and there of the Holy Family. Though he found none to worship, he found many to help. He fed the hungry, clothed the naked, healed the sick, and comforted the captive. His years moved swiftly by. After 33 had gone, in his old age an irresistible impulse came upon him to go up again to Jerusalem. He had his pearl and was looking for the king. It was the season of the Passover when he reached the city. There was great excitement. Multitudes were being swept as by a secret tide toward the Damascus gate. He joined the throng and inquired the cause of the tumult and where they were going. "We are going," they answered, "outside the city walls, to a place called Golgotha, where Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews, is to be crucified." How strangely the words fell on the tired heart of Artaban. At last he was to see the king, and he still had his pearl, in time perhaps to offer it as a ransom. A troop of Macedonian soldiers came down the street dragging a young girl in bondage and slavery for debts of her father who had died. Being of Artaban's country, she recognized the sign of the priesthood, the winged circle of gold which he wore. Tearing away from the soldiers and throwing herself at his feet, she prayed, "Have pity upon me, save me from a fate that is worse than death." Artaban trembled as a conflict entered his soul. It was the old conflict which had come to him in the palm grove and again in the stone cottage. The conflict began between expectations of faith and the impulses of love. In the darkness of his mind, it seemed clear that the inevitable comes from God. He took the pearl from his bosom and placed it in the slave girl's hand, saying, "This is thy ransom. It is the last of my jewels which I kept for the king." As he spoke, the sky darkened, the earth quaked, and the houses rocked. A heavy tile, shaken from a roof, fell and struck the old man on the temple. He lay breathless and pale. As she bent over him, there came a voice through the twilight, small and still, like music sounding from a distance. The old man's lips began to move. She heard him say, "Not so, my lord, for when I saw thee, and hungered, and fed thee, or thirsty, and gave thee to drink, 33 years have I sought thee, but I have never seen thy face, nor ministered to thee, my king." Again the maid heard the sweet voice, faintly as from afar, but now it seemed as though she understood the words. "Verily I say unto thee, inasmuch as thou hast done unto one of the least of these my brethren, thou hast done it unto me." At the end of the journey, in the presence of human need, in the expression of human sympathy, in the rendering of human service, he came face to face with his king and discovered his lost word. He heard a divine voice saying, "Inasmuch," and "Well done, good and faithful servant." The lost word symbolizes the kind of truth that cannot be acquired from reading books, that cannot be obtained by paying so much money and listening to so many college lectures. It symbolizes a truth that must be wrought out through the vicissitudes of life and personal experience. If the word stands for the personality, the attributes, the power, and the glory of God, we must be satisfied with a substitute, because human life and ages of time are too short for a complete revelation of that high and holy name. The whole design of Masonic science is a quest for the truth. Divine truth is symbolized by the Logos, the Word, the Name. Through this symbol, all the other symbols of Masonry guide a man onward and upward to God, over the hills to a valley of endless years, over roads of woe to a land without a tear, up from the haunts of men to the place where the angels are. This is a march of morality to a wonderful goal afar. So mote it be. This was exactly one of the Short Talk bulletins that I used as a reference piece and is cited within the presentation that I give on the Tetragrammaton. I think there's 3 pieces of this one that I talk about, Brother Haywood and whatnot, but what a fantastic piece. The story here of the 4th wise man was always really cool. And this constant giving away of something is really interesting regarding a philosopher that many of you may have read, which is Friedrich Nietzsche. There's something to what he talks about in the Superman that is echoed here in this idea of sacrifice, blessed is the man who forgets himself kind of thing. Next up, let's get into this week's Masonic Minute with illustrious brother Stephen L. Harrison. Let's check it out.
Just what, he asked, do you do inside those lodge rooms? The question came out of nowhere, unexpected. A friend sitting across from me at lunch just suddenly exploded with curiosity, wondering what mysterious things we Masons do in secret. I recalled asking a similar question myself as I stood outside a lodge room as a non-Mason, waiting for admission to present my father his 50-year pin. What in the world must be going on in there? Many in the profane world, on the rare occasions their thoughts turn to Freemasonry, ask the same question or similar questions about the fraternity. In the ensuing silence, absent annoying facts, the deadly combination of imagination and speculation, mixed with the enticing elixir of mystery and secrecy, sets in. We have seen all too many examples of the resulting urban legends about our activities. Our word mystery derives from the Greek word mysterion, implying secrecy. It was used to describe the activities and tenets of the many ancient Greek guilds, brotherhoods, and schools of philosophy. Only the initiates of those organizations knew their secrets, which were beyond the understanding of outsiders. Sound familiar? The word is likewise used in the Bible. In Matthew 13:11, Jesus says, "To you," speaking to his disciples, "it has been granted to know the mysteries," mysterion, "of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been granted," emphasizing the concept that his disciples have knowledge beyond the capacity of outsiders to understand. Individuals or groups, everyone has secrets. Your company's board of directors doesn't always make its minutes public. Your church trustees discuss confidential topics. Individuals have things they want to keep to themselves. I have even personally known 2 couples who were secretly married. We revere our secrets, and most times we have them for what we think are legitimate reasons. But just let someone else have a secret and it will draw people like a magnet. Busybodies of the world unite. When Brother Meriwether Lewis scouted ahead of the Corps of Discovery and climbed that first mountain in the Rockies, he did not know what he would find at the summit. It was a mystery. He later wrote that he conjured up a picture of the mountain sloping down into a green valley with the Columbia River flowing through it, and maybe, far, far away, a glimpse of the Pacific Ocean and their final destination. When he got to the top, he saw nothing of the sort as he looked at miles and miles and miles of more mountaintops. his imagination did not match reality. Rather, a rough and rugged road was revealed to him. Rarely is our speculation about what will be revealed an accurate outcome. Most mysteries don't lead to speculation about green fields and flowing rivers, do they? Given human nature, the imagination seems to lead us down a more sinister path or into something just plain weird. Swamp gas becomes a flying saucer. Or was it the other way around? So, Freemasonry, a system of morality veiled in allegory, illustrated by symbols, and all that stuff, becomes an easy target. Outsiders see the symbols, some looking weird and exotic. They don't understand or don't know about the allegory, and voila, a mysterion. Now, throw in a dab of secrecy, and you've got people worked into a frenzy. It is common for law enforcement agencies to withhold information about a suspect during an investigation. They do this in order to avoid tipping off the suspect about what they know. This, of course, drives people crazy. They want to know everything, and they want to know now, even though releasing that information might be detrimental to their ultimate goal, catching the suspect. Transparency is good, but so is discretion. We love our own secrets and hate other people's. So my company can keep its plans confidential, but not those sinister Freemasons. And by the way, secret does not mean sinister. Here's a pro tip. Don't write a book called The History of Freemasonry. Call it The Secret History of Freemasonry. It's good for sales. Mystery, secrecy, imagination, and speculation. Mix them all together and you give people license to run free and wild and come up with opinions like these.
I don't have any real proof, but I know for sure Freemasonry is a cult. Freemasons worship Satan. Freemasons control the world. Freemasonry is a secret society. Freemasons are elitists.
When it really gets fun is when the entertainment world takes over. There, our lodge rooms have passageways to strange places. We take on supernatural powers. Our altars and other lodge furnishings open up to reveal mysterious things. We solve complicated and cryptic puzzles like they're second grade math. We know all the secrets, not just of Freemasonry, but of life and the universe. We are, in fact, the adept. So I answered my friend's question. In our lodge rooms, we have an opening based upon a ritual. While it's not public, you can find a pretty good representation of it in your local library or on the all-knowing internet. We conduct a business meeting. Sometimes we have an educational program or discussion. Then we have a ritual-based closing. On certain occasions, we initiate new members into the Masonic degrees, and we also hold officer installations and other ceremonies which are open to the public. Then I ask, "Are you disappointed?" He politely said no, but I couldn't help but wonder if what I had told him had his imagination running wild. For the Whence Came You podcast, this is Steve Harrison with the Masonic Minute.
All right, what an awesome comeback for illustrious Brother Harrison. He had taken a bit of a sabbatical and he's back at it, and I'm sure he will be releasing things every now and again as he has time and works his way back into a regular groove, perhaps. How many times have you been asked about the secrecy of Freemasonry, or when somebody looks at you funny after you tell them you're a Mason? You know, for me, it's only happened one or two times where somebody who is profane has found out that I was a Mason and just stared at me with crazy intent. One of them, a nephew from Tennessee. Just a bizarre exchange. For the Craftsman Plus, perhaps you can tell us if you've got an interesting story about an eccentric individual who approached you about Masonry. All right, this week we're going to hit up that tarot segment again. Going to open this classic deck, which is a Smith-Waite deck. The cards are antiqued. I did kind of notice the top of the deck having a little bit of a key to knowing if the cards are upright or not, which is kind of a bummer because once I discovered it, I'll never forget it. You're always fixated on it. So let me shuffle these up. And for those who have never heard of this or done this with us before, all I'm doing is simply grabbing one card from the tarot deck, and I'm going to look at it in terms of what it can tell me about my life right now, what it could mean for you in your life perhaps, and we look at it in terms of looking at a situation that could be happening in your life and using that as a lens to be a little bit contemplative. How does whatever story the card tells relate to my life, if anything at all? It's really no different than, say, am I using my 24 hours in a day appropriately? Well, let's see what these card meanings have to say for us. We're just going to draw one card. This is not a Masonic tool at all. In fact, it's not Masonry at all. It's its own thing. But there are a number of you out there who dig the idea of a contemplative practice and making it fresh with a little bit different perspective, which is why we're using a tarot deck, because there are 78 cards, which means there are 78 times 2 scenarios that could be coming up for us. So a little bit different of a perspective. Let's see what the card has. I'm just giving them a quick shuffle, and I'm just going to pull a random card. For the Craftsman Plus, I will go ahead and I will share the card image with you in the Facebook group, link back to what it is. So the card is a Knight of Pentacles inversed. So the Knight of Pentacles, as it is upright, would indicate something like what other knight cards typically represent, which is working. A knight is not a king, so he's not sitting down and directing things. He's a knight. He's working. He's somebody who's in the job. It's work and effort and responsibility. And of course, Pentacles is like a coin, so it speaks to the nature of monetary value, perhaps. But when this card is reversed, it's really about something else. Like, what's stopping us from being a workhorse? Is there something that talks about discipline, our own discipline? How can we achieve the things that we want to do? And instead of hopping all over the place, this card might be telling us, hey, it's time to sit down and make a schedule and stick to the darn thing. I know occasionally I get hung up with things during the midst of the week, and I have to set a Pomodoro or like a tomato timer where I'm working straight for 45 minutes before I can do anything else. It helps me stick to what I'm doing. And perhaps that's something that we can learn too in regards to the 24-inch gauge within Masonry. Are we making sure that we're sticking and walking the course and doing what we have to do to make sure that things get done? Now, the Knight of Pentacles can also be something of we're working, right? We are working towards something, but perhaps there could be something that we're working toward that is in direct relation to our personal development. Maybe this means that you started a new diet plan or an exercise routine. That's really cool. And in general, it's kind of like getting your life together. And the last thing I'll say about it is maybe this means that you are working really hard and you are bringing home the bacon, as we might say, really making that cash or working towards some sort of monetary freedom, but you're having some difficult times being a perfectionist. When I think about perfectionism, the first thing that I think of is like Masonic ritual, and how many times I might go through a piece of ritual and there's always some dude who's got to come up to me and say you missed the word "the" or you missed whatever that might be. And I really wish they'd stop doing that and just say, hey, great job, because ultimately, word perfect is great, but did we deliver? And was it good and believable? And it sounded awesome? Yeah, that's what we should focus on. But this idea of perfectionism, are we getting caught up in our own perfectionism? Are we becoming, our own vultures of ritual or something else? And maybe it's time to let go a little bit. But that's it for this week. I want to thank you all for coming with me on this edifying journey. I hope you enjoyed. Once again, I want to thank our producers, fellows, contributors of the show. I want to thank Recovery Lodge number 31 for having me out, and also the upcoming presentations I'll be giving. Just check the schedule on wcypodcast.com. Again, if you want to help support the show, head on over to wcypodcast.com, click on Support the Show, and check out your various options to support the program. That's it. Until next week, stay on the level. For Whence Came You, I'm Robert Johnson. Take care.
You've been listening to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry with your host, Brother Robert Johnson. Be sure to join us for our next edition.
WCY Media.
That's it. Yes, girl.